your daughter can wait outside. This dinner is for our kids, my fiancés. Mother said, blocking the door while her grandchildren ran inside carrying gift bags. My little girl stood beside me in the cold, clutching my hand. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I handed her an envelope and said, this is for you. Open it later. She smiled and tucked it into her purse. That night, at exactly 11:47 p.m., my phone lit up with the first of 79 missed calls. My name is Carrie Dillian. I am 36 years old and I work as a real estate paralegal at a small firm 2 towns over from where I grew up. I have been doing this for 10 years. The way I think is how I survive. I notice things. I document things. I do not act on feelings until I can show you the paper behind them. I work mostly on residential transactions, closings, title searches, deed prep, the occasional refinance. People come to our firm at the biggest moments of their lives, often scared, often not fully understanding what they are signing. Part of my job is to sit across from them and explain it in plain language without making them feel stupid. I am good at that. I also know that the quietest clause in the room is usually the one that matters most. My daughter, Mia, was 6 that December. She had a gap in her front teeth, and she narrated everything she did out loud. Tying shoes, pouring cereal in the third person like she was the subject of a nature documentary. She goes for the double knot today. The crowd approves. I raised her mostly alone. Her dad left when she was 2. By the time I met Derek, it had been just the 2 of us. Long enough that we had a system, a routine, a particular shape to our lives. That worked. We were fine. I mean that. Seriously, fine is not a consolation prize. Fine is what you call it when the people inside the situation are okay. I met Derek Calloway at a continuing education conference for real estate professionals. He offered me the extra coffee he'd gotten as insurance before the morning rush. We talked through the first session about things that had nothing to do with the conference, and at lunch he asked if I wanted to keep talking, and I said yes, and surprised myself. He was easy to be with. He showed up when he said he would. He listened when I talked. He laughed easily, including at himself. On our 3rd date, he noticed the leg on my kitchen table was wobbly and went to his truck and got a screwdriver and fixed it in 4 minutes without making any announcement about it. He did not expect thanks. He just saw a problem and solved it in the specific language of my personality. This was deeply attractive. On our 5th date, he met Mia. He brought her colored pencils in a metal tin, not princess themed, just good ones. Artist grade, 64 colors. She drew him a brachiosaurus, her favorite dinosaur, and showed it to him with the shy sideways presentation. That means she actually cares what you think. He looked at it for a long moment and said very seriously, the neck is anatomically accurate. She looked at him like he'd said something sacred. He kept that drawing in his truck for months, tucked behind the sun visor on the passenger side. I saw it every time I got in. The first time Mia called him by name instead of mom's friend, she didn't even notice she'd done it. But the next morning I heard her narrating her breakfast. She thinks maybe this one is going to stay. The dinosaur evidence is pretty strong. That was the moment I let myself want it. We dated 11 months. He proposed on a Tuesday evening in my kitchen after dinner while I was washing dishes and he was drying them. No restaurant, no audience. He set down the dish he was drying and held out a ring and said, I want us to be a family, all 3 of us. Is that something you want? I said, yes. He picked the dish back up and dried it. That was us at our best. The problem had a name, Sandra. Sandra Calloway was 62 and had spent her entire adult life inside the identity of a woman whose family owned property. The property was a 4-unit rental building in the next town over, brick built in. The 70s, well positioned near the community college. She had inherited it from her own mother 11 years prior and had never managed a rental property before. She couldn't manage it. I mean, that in the most specific professional sense. She didn't understand her own lease terms. She deferred maintenance because quotes always came in higher than she expected. She commingled personal and business funds. She raised rents inconsistently, sometimes not at all. 3 of the 4 units had been vacant for 8 months. The 4th tenant was 3 months behind. I didn't know any the night Derek showed up. It was a Tuesday in late June, about 7 months before Christmas. Mia was asleep. I was reading on the couch. The knock came at 10:15, late for Derek to come by, unannounced, and when I opened the door, he was holding a manila folder the way a person holds something they're afraid of. I made coffee. He sat at my kitchen table and laid it out. 2 years of back property taxes with compounding penalties. A second mortgage Sandra had taken out 3 years ago for repairs that never happened. A contractor's lien that had matured. 11 weeks until the building went to tax sale. The only way out was a refinance, pull out equity to cover the debt. The problem was Sandra's credit. Years of mismanagement had wrecked it. She could not qualify for a loan alone. She needed a co-signer with clean numbers and documented income. She needed me. Derek said, only on paper. Said, temporary. Said, family was. Family. I know what co-signing means. It means your name is on the note. It means your credit absorbs the damage if payments are missed. It means in a default you are jointly and severally liable. The legal phrase for wholly on. The hook not split between 2 people. Wholly for 0 personal financial benefit. Was looking at me the way he'd looked at me as dinosaur drawing, and I was still new enough to this family to believe that gestures in one direction meant the whole family was pointing that way. I said yes. I said it the way I say yes to anything important once. Clearly, without drama. And then I said, we're going to do it correctly. Sandra came to my office the following week with Derek. I sat them both at my desk, and I walked through the transaction in the same plain language I use for nervous clients. I explained what co-signing meant legally. I explained the payment structure, the rate, the monthly obligations. I explained that I would be monitoring the payments and that I expected them to come from Sandra's account on time every month. She signed with her mouth pressed in a line that told me nothing good. Derek signed crying. I walked them through every page. I answered every question. When we got to the co-signer release clause in paragraph 14, the provision I had insisted on, the standard protective language that would matter more than anything else in the story, Sandra glanced at it and looked up at me. I explained it plainly. It was a release option, a standard provision allowing the co-signer to exit the loan if the primary borrower could eventually refinance independently. She looked at me for a moment with the expression of a woman who was deciding whether to ask something and then she didn't ask it. She signed. I noted that she didn't ask. I watched the clerk at the county recorder's office stamp the instrument into the record. I drove home and sat in my car in the parking lot of my building for a few minutes before going upstairs. Not because I was scared, because I had done a large thing and I wanted to register it. $92,000 was the careful savings of a decade of disciplined living. It was the number I had decided years ago represented the distance between me and real vulnerability. I had put my name on that amount and specifically on that clause in paragraph 14 to rescue a building owned by a woman who had barely looked me in the eye. And I wanted to sit with the weight of that before I went inside. The first payment came on time. The second came 4 days late, but it cleared. The third never came. The auto draft pulled from my backup account, the secondary account I'd listed as a failsafe in the loan application. I called Derek that evening and told him what had happened. Matter-of-factly, he said his mother had an unexpected expense. She'd due double. Next month, she was embarrassed. Next month, same thing. I let it go. Then I opened a folder on my desktop entitled A Callaway Loan Log, and I started keeping records. Every missed payment. Date every text where Derek asked me to be patient every time my account covered hers. I named the folder plainly because I named things plainly. The payments didn't stabilize. They came from my account almost every month. There were months where Sandra sent a partial, enough to show effort, not enough to cover the amount, and the remainder drafted from my side. There were 2 months where nothing came from her at all. Derek's explanations shifted through a small rotation, a repair that came in higher than expected, a difficult tenant situation still being resolved, a check from somewhere that was delayed in processing, a timing issue that would sort itself out. Each time I listened, each time I made a note, each time I gave him another month, the folder grew. By October, it contained 17 payment records with notations on source account, 11 text message logs summarized a running total of the amount I had personally covered, above and beyond my co-signed obligation, and a timeline of Derek's stated explanations in chronological order. I kept it the way I keep every file I care about, clean, dated, verifiable, not because I had a plan, yet because I am a paralegal, and when something matters, you keep the record. What I was doing, I recognized later, was the same thing I do at the closing table when a client doesn't understand something. I was backing up and trying a different way in looking for the version of this where the payments normalized and what I had done became a gift that worked out instead of a mistake with documentation. I was being patient because I was still at that point in love with the person I thought this family was going to be. The slight started around the same time, quietly, the way important things usually start. The first Sunday family dinner I brought Mia to. Sandra seated the children at a card table in the den, paper plates, plastic cups, fine in theory. After dinner, I went to gather the kids and noticed that Derek's sister Paige's children, Tyler and Maddie, had a small plate of the nice shortbread cookies. From the coffee table, Mia had a napkin, not an empty plate, a napkin, a sheath. Someone had handed it to her for cookies, and then forgotten to add the cookies. Mia didn't mention it. She came when I called her and helped carry plates to the kitchen and said nothing. She had already learned to metabolize these things quietly, and watching her do it made me want to take that particular skill back out of her like a splinter. I told Derek that night, level-voiced, that I'd noticed Mia hadn't gotten cookies. He said it was oversight. He said his mother wasn't good with kids. Outside the ones she knew, he said give it time. The following month, Sandra handed out after dinner chocolates from a box on the sideboard, individual wrapped pieces, a signature element at every gathering. She handed one to each adult. She gave 2 to Tyler and Maddie, who were standing right there. She did not give one to Mia, who was also standing right there. And then she moved past them and put the box back. Mia watched the box go back with the expression I have come to recognize. A slight settling in her face, a small internal adjustment, the look of a child who has decided something is fine when it isn't. She made it without drama and went back to whatever she was doing. I did not mention it to Derek that night. I made a note in the folder. In October, Sandra organized the family Christmas card photo. She called everyone in from the backyard and arranged them on the porch steps. Derek aged the kids, the cousins. She handed me her phone and asked if I would take it. I took 4 photos from different angles. She thanked me by name and went inside. I was not in the photo. Mia was not in the photo. Nobody mentioned this. In late October, there was a birthday dinner for Derek's cousin Jim. 12 people at Sandra's table. Mia sat through the whole meal quietly, which is not her natural state. Mia is a talker, a narrator, a person who asks questions and follows up on the answers with more questions, but she had learned over the preceding 2 months to be quiet at that table, to not volunteer herself. I had watched this happen incrementally, and I had made notes, but I had not yet fully understood what I was watching. A 6-year-old practicing invisibility as a survival strategy in a room where visibility had not worked out well for her. After dinner, Sandra brought out a birthday cake for Jim and cut it and passed out slices going around the table. By age oldest first, the way she always did things, she gave a slice to every adult. She cut 2 smaller pieces for Tyler and Maddie. She put the serving knife down and carried the cake back to the sideboard. Mia, who had been watching from her seat with the expression of someone who is not sure if they're being counted, did not get cake. Not because Sandra forgot. Sandra did not forget things. She had counted the plates before sitting down. The omission had the same quality as every other omission, smooth, assured, the quality of a decision already made. Mia caught my eye across the table. She gave me the micro shrug of a child who is being gracious about something that is not gracious. I cut my piece in half and gave her the other half and told her it was birthday cake, so she was legally required to eat the icing first. She did. In the car home, she narrated the flavor in professional detail. I did not mention it to Derek. I made a note. In November, Sandra posted a photo to the family group text, a kitchen island, lined with gift bags, deep green, gold, ribbon, identical bows. She captioned it, getting ready for Christmas. The grandkids' bags have been done since October this year. Early bird, I counted 3 bags, Tyler, Maddie, and the Raleigh cousin who came every year. No 4th. I mentioned it to Derek. He said Mia wasn't technically a grandchild. Yet, the wedding wasn't until spring. He said his mom kept the tradition specific. He said it wasn't a reflection on Mia. I said, Derek, Mia has been to every family event at your mother's house since August. Your mother has never spoken to my daughter directly. Not once. I need you to understand that. This is not about a gift bag. It is about whether my daughter is being seen. He said he understood. He said he talked to his mom. He said, give it time. I gave it time. I made a note. The folder was getting long. 2 weeks. Before Christmas, I was part of a side text page had set up for dinner coordination. I had muted it almost immediately. Low traffic, mostly not relevant to me. Then one Thursday evening, someone tagged the caterers. Contact wrong thread, and it opened on my screen. I scrolled to close it and saw a message from 3 days earlier. Page 2. Sandra, hey mom, quick cue for the gift bags. Are we getting one for Mia this year, or keeping it the same? Sandra, 20 minutes later, same as before. She's not ours yet. The bags are for the grandchildren. Her mother can handle her. Page, a thumbs up. I set the phone down on the couch cushion next to me and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Not because I was surprised. I was not entirely surprised, but because there is a difference between inferring a thing from behavior and having it typed out plainly in front of you. Her mother can handle her. 5 words that contained an entire architecture. The deliberate exclusion, the coordination, the decision made between 2 people before any of us ever arrived at that Christmas Eve door. The napkin, the photo, the missing gift bag, none of it. Oversight, all of it policy, agreed to, and confirmed in writing. I took a screenshot. I added it to the folder. Then I sat at the kitchen table, the one Derek had a text on our 3rd date, the one where Sandra had signed her name on the loan documents while I explained every clause in plain language. And I thought about what I was going to do. I did not make any decision that night to bed. That is what I do. The next morning, Before I called anyone, I opened the county recorder's website and pulled up the recorded instrument on the property. Loan. I read it the way I read any document I care about, slowly from the beginning without skipping anything. I found paragraph 14, the cosigner release clause. I had put it in the document in June out of professional habit, the way you account for every possibility, even the ones you hope never arise. It provided that the cosigner could, under certain conditions, initiate a refinance. That removed them from the loan entirely, provided the primary borrower had sufficient equity and could demonstrate capacity to service the debt alone. I had written that clause. Sandra had signed it without asking what it was. Derek had nodded and moved on. I called Marcus Ramos. Ramos has worked at the firm longer than I have. He handles refinances. He has done hundreds of them. I told him I needed to explore a cosigner release on a loan I was carrying. I told him the property address and the outstanding balance. He went quiet for a moment and said, "How much equity does the primary have?" I told him what the original appraisal had shown, noting the property had likely appreciated since. He said it was tight, but possibly workable. He said the primary would need to qualify independently, which, given her credit, history was the hard part, but that substantial equity could compensate. He said give him a few days, 3 days. Later, doable. Not with every lender, but he had a relationship that specialized in non-standard qualification, higher rate than what Sandra currently had, because what she currently had was subsidized by my credit score, but payments in the same range. Sandra would have to sign the new documents. I said, good. I spent 2 weeks moving paper. Ramos handled the lender relationship. A new appraisal was ordered. It came in at a number that supported the transaction. The new loan documents were drafted in Sandra's name. Only my name appeared in the release paperwork and nowhere else. I signed the cosigner release on December 23rd, a Monday morning, between a title closing and my lunch break. The transaction was processed and recorded by end of business on the morning of December 24th. The loan transferred into active status. Sandra Calloway was now the sole borrower on the debt secured by her rental property. Every payment, every obligation, every consequence going forward, hers alone. My name was off the note. My credit was no longer at risk. For $1 of her real estate problem, I printed the confirmation letter, folded it into thirds, and put it in a plain white envelope. Inside the envelope with the letter, I had also placed a handwritten note in my own handwriting, 7 words. You told my daughter she could wait outside. Then I drove home and got Nia ready for Christmas Eve. She had been baking since the previous afternoon, sugar cookies with green frosting, 8 of them, 2 for each of the 3 cousins and 2 extra because, in her professional opinion, Tyler would want more, and she knew from experience she had packed them in a flat tin she'd saved from a tea set we'd received as a gift and covered it with Christmas stickers she'd bought at the dollar store with her own money, each one placed with the specific care she brings to things she is serious about. Her red dress, the one with the white collar that she called her fancy dress, worn only to occasions she considered significant. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at herself with a small critical squint. I recognized as satisfaction. She asked if her hair was okay. I said it was perfect. She said she thought so too, but she wanted to know if I saw it. In the car, she held the tin in both hands on her lap, on top of her seatbelt, the whole drive, narrating quietly to the air the way she always does. She's bringing cookies. She made them herself. She thinks Maddie might like the ones with the extra frosting. She thinks Tyler will definitely want to. A pause. She's feeling good about the stickers. The penguin one was an excellent choice. I drove with the envelope in the inside pocket of my coat, solid and specific. And I thought about what I was doing. I had given Sandra every door I could think of. I had been patient for 7 months of missed payments. I had been patient through the napkin and the photo, and the gift bag count and the cake at Jim's birthday. I had made my notes and I had held the column, and I had not acted because acting requires certainty. And I had been trying to give the uncertainty room to resolve itself into something I could live with. It had not resolved. It had compounded the way debt compounds when nobody is tending to it. I had one more door. I was giving her one more door, and I meant it. I mean that genuinely. If Mia walked through that door and sat at that table and was handed anything at all with her name on it, I was going home with the envelope still in my coat, and I was going to sit with that and decide what trying harder looked like. I drove. I made myself a promise. One more door. If Mia walked through it, if she was handed anything with her name on it, any gesture, any acknowledgement, the envelope stayed in my coat, and I would go home and think carefully about what trying harder looked like. I would give Sandra that if she didn't. The envelope changed hands. We parked at the bottom of the long drive because the street was lined with cars on both sides. The house was lit up the way it always was for these occasions. Every window warm, Christmas lights on the porch rail, a wreath on the door. From the road, it looked like the warmest place in the county. Mia jumped out before I fully stopped, remembered the tin, and turned back for it. She checked the stickers on the lid. One corner had lifted slightly on the drive and pressed it back down, carefully with her thumb, the way she does things she is serious about. We walked up together, her hand in mine, her boots making a small sound on the frozen ground. Her breath came out in little clouds. Music drifted from the house, something traditional and instrumental, and underneath it the sound of voices, a room full of people in the middle of a holiday. The smell of roast meat reached us halfway up the drive. For about 60 seconds, it was exactly what it looked like. I had promised myself I would let it be that. If it was one more door, the city. Cousins pulled up behind us. Their kids came spilling out and ran up the steps ahead of us, calling for their grandmother. Paige appeared in the doorway with the gift bags, 3 of them, deep green, gold ribbon, individual tags. She lifted them by the bow. The cousins took theirs and tore inside. The gold ribbon caught the porch light. She slowed beside me. I felt her hand tighten. We reached the top step, and then Sandra filled the doorway. Green silk, pearls, a hostess's expression already arranged for people she actually wanted there. When she saw me, it cooled degree by degree, not dramatically, just carefully. She looked down at Mia. The foyer behind her was full. Paige still inside. Derek visible. Further back, cup in hand, Jim and his wife by the sideboard. The cousins running somewhere deeper. 12 people in that foyer, all peripherally aware that something was happening at the door. Mia looked up at Sandra. She lifted the tin, an offering, and started the sentence she had practiced in the mirror that morning. Merry cry. Sandra's hand moved to the door frame. Not a dramatic motion, small, controlled. She laid her fingers there the way a queen closes a gate, and she said it in a voice pitched to carry into the foyer, clear enough for every person inside to hear. Your daughter can wait outside. This dinner is for our kids. She didn't bend down. She delivered it all standing height, looking down past her pearls at a 6-year-old in a red dress holding a tin of cookies she had made herself. She used the voice she used for corrections, the gentle, instructive tone of someone who is not being unkind. Exactly. Who is simply clarifying how things work too. Someone who is confused about them. The foyer went silent. I want to describe what happened in that silence, because silences have textures, and this one had a very specific one. It was the silence of a room full of people who have just heard something they cannot unknow and are processing what it means that they heard it and did not object. Paige looked at Dolores. Jim's wife looked at Jim. The cousins who had run inside a minute ago came partway back toward the door, alerted by the quiet, and stopped. Derek was still. The whole bright room was still. Mia's hand went still in mine. She didn't cry. My daughter did. The thing I have apparently taught her to do by example. She made herself quiet. She lowered the tin an inch, stood very still in the cold, and said nothing, because she had learned that when the room turns against you, the thing to do is get small. I have never wanted so badly to take something back that I didn't mean to teach. I looked at Derek, 8 feet away, my fiancé, the man who had kept her drawing in his truck for 7 months. He had taken a half step toward the door when Sandra spoke. I saw it, and then I watched him calculate the weight of what his mother had said against what speaking would cost him, and I watched the calculation finish. He stopped. He looked at his shoes, and then he said in a voice meant only for me, Tess, please, not in front of everyone. Not tonight. Not tonight. I want to be fair about what that phrase means. Not tonight is not cruelty. It is. Not even cowardice, exactly. It is what a man says when he has spent his entire life finding the place of least resistance between two difficult things, and has decided for the last time that the place of least resistance is still the place he is going to stand. It is a sentence that disguises itself as a postponement, but is actually a position. It was the only thing he had left, and it told me everything I needed to know about the sum of the column I had been keeping. I let it register, all of it. And then I acted. I crouched down to Mia's level on the step. I took her free hand, and I looked at her directly so that only she could hear me. I said, you did everything right, absolutely. Everything. We are going to go get hot chocolate with the little marshmallows. She looked at me. Then she said, can we get 2 packets? I said, we can get all the packets. I stood up. I reached into the inside pocket of my coat. I took out the plain white envelope, the confirmation letter, the handwritten note, the knowledge that as of that morning, Sandra Calloway was the sole borrower on every dollar of debt secured by her rental property, and I held it out toward her. She looked at it with confusion that told me she had expected something else. Tears, maybe a scene. She could manage. I said, for you, open it later. She took it between 2 fingers, the way she had taken my hand the first day we met. She began to formulate something, a gracious dismissal, something final about hoping I had a lovely holiday. I did not wait for it. I took Mia's hand. I turned around. I walked us back down that long driveway through the snow, past all the cars, past the lights on the porch rail, past the warm windows, my daughter's boots squeaking on the cold ground, her breath puffing in small clouds, the tin still in her other hand because she hadn't put it down. Behind us, I heard the door close. Inside, the party went on. We drove to McDonald's. The car was cold enough that our breath fogged the windshield before the heater caught. Mia sat in the back with the tin in her lap, both hands around it, and for a long time, neither of us said anything. I know enough from the closing table, from Mia herself, from the particular texture of this kind of quiet to know that pushing into it too soon makes it close off. So I drove and let her process. She looked out the window for most of it at the Christmas lights in all the houses. We passed people inside having whatever Christmas they were having, warm and lit, and their own. After a few minutes, she shifted and looked at her tin, and then back out the window, then into the quiet of the car. Mommy, did I do something wrong? I want you to sit with that. 7 words from a 6-year-old in a red dress with a tin of cookies on her lap, standing on a porch in the snow in front of a house full of people had Taught her in one evening that the fault must be hers. That is what exclusion does when it is delivered clearly enough. It teaches the person being excluded to carry the explanation. I kept my eyes on the road. I kept my voice level. I said, no, baby, you did not do one single thing wrong. There are grown-ups in the world who forget how to be kind, and when they do, that is about them. It is not about you. It will never be about you. She thought about it. She looked out the window. She said, I think Maddie would have liked the extra frosting one. I said she would have. You can leave the tin in the car and I will eat them all myself. She said, you cannot eat all 8. I said, watch me. She laughed small and genuine, the way she laughs when I say something that surprises her. And I pulled into the McDonald's parking lot and we went inside and she got a happy meal and I got coffee and she narrated the entire unboxing in full sportscaster voice. She opens the box. It's nuggets. It is nuggets. The crowd goes absolutely wild. And I sat across from her and let her be exactly who she is. We drove home. Mia fell asleep in the car. I carried her inside, changed her into pajamas without fully waking her, and tucked her in with her stuffed elephant. I sat on the edge of her bed for a moment in the dark. Then I went to the kitchen and made tea and sat at the table and looked at my phone. At exactly 11:47, it lit up. Sandra. I watched it go to voicemail. It lit up again and again. By the 5th call, I knew the envelope had been opened. By the 7th page, then Derek, then Sandra again. I knew it had been read. By the time I went to bed, at 1 o'clock in the morning, there had been 26 calls. When I woke on Christmas morning, there were 79. I counted them before I made coffee. Then I made coffee and listened to all 79 voicemails in order from the beginning. Sandra's first voicemail was rage, cold, controlled, architectural, not the screaming kind, the kind that comes from a woman who has spent 62 years being the authority in every room she has ever entered. Now, speaking to someone who has declined to treat her as one. She called me vindictive. She called me manipulative. She said she had seen through me from the beginning. She said she had tolerated me for Derek's sake, and now understood that had been a mistake. She said I had used her family's vulnerability against them, which is an interesting framing from a woman who had defaulted on a loan I co-signed for 10 months and called it a timing issue. She said I needed to call her back immediately before things escalated further. She did not say my daughter's name. Sandra's second voicemail, 14 minutes later, was different. The rage was still there, but something under it had cracked. A roughness in her voice that told me someone had done the math out loud. The building, the whole building, the thing that was the center of her identity as a woman who owned property. She said she wanted to resolve this privately as family. She still used that word. Paige's voicemails were panic, honest, and unguarded. The voice of a woman who has just discovered that a floor she has been standing on is not as solid as she assumed. She mentioned the building 3 times across 2 messages. She mentioned her children's college funds in a way that told me she had said this privately to her husband, to Sandra, in the conversations I was not part of, and was now saying it out loud in panic without meaning to. She said she understood I was upset. Christmas Eve had gotten out of hand and things were said that shouldn't have been said. She did not specify which things. She said we were family. You don't do this to family. She did not say Mia's name either. Derek's first voicemail was anger, short, clipped, the voice of a man who has been blindsided. He said I should have talked to him first. He said this was extreme, and I knew it. His second voicemail, 40 minutes later, was different. The anger had burned down to something truer. He said he knew he should have said something at the door. He said he had taken a step toward it, and then he Hadn't, and he knew how that looked, and he was sorry. He said he had known for months that something needed to change, and had told himself every time that it was going to resolve on its own if he just stayed patient and kept managing everyone carefully. He said he could see now that managing everyone carefully was not the same as fixing anything. He said, please call him back. He said they could fix this. He said he should have said something at the door at 1:17 in the morning on Christmas Day, for hours after my daughter had stood on a porch step in the snow in her red dress and been told she could wait outside. Derek Calloway said out loud on my voicemail that he should have said something. I want to give him that. He said it. He admitted it in the middle of the night, alone with his phone, when there was no audience and nothing to gain. That matters. It is more than Sandra said, and more than Paige said, and I give it its full weight. I want to give him that. He said it. That matters. He was more honest in that voicemail than he had been for most of the year, and I noted it the way I note everything, but in none of those voicemails, not Sandra's, not Paige's, not Derek's, in none of the 79 calls I counted did anyone say Mia's name. 79 calls about the building, 0 about the child who had stood on the step with a tin of cookies she had made herself. That was the last number I needed. Derek called for the 80th time at 9:14 on Christmas morning live, and I answered because he had earned one conversation. He started quickly, afraid I'd hang up. Then noticed what we could do. His mother was ready to talk. I let him finish. Then I said quietly, the terms are in the letter, Derek. You've always told me your mother handles the money. Let her handle it. I ended the call. I set the phone face down and went and made my daughter pancakes with chocolate chips because it was Christmas morning and that was our tradition, and she narrated the entire process from the kitchen table in her pajamas. She's going for the chips directly from the bag. No. Measuring. This is bold. This is the move of a woman who has done this before. And I laughed because it was true. We had a good Christmas. I want that to be part of the story, not as a triumph. I am not interested in triumph, but as the truth. The day was ordinary and warm, and ours, and Mia was there in it fully, without performing anything or enduring anything, just being herself at the table with the gap in her teeth and the running commentary that makes her exactly who she is. The resolution came quickly because mathematics are undeniable when they are documented and recorded. Sandra's attorney called the firm on December 27th. Ramos took the call. The options were what they had always been, written clearly in the letter. Cure the situation by refinancing independently within 30 days, or allow the default provisions to run their course. There was no third option. She refinanced in 19 days at an actual commercial lender in her own name at a rate that reflected her actual financial history without the benefit of my credit score standing behind it. She signed documents that made her, in the clearest possible way, the person responsible for everything that happened to that building going forward. The payoff check arrived on January 14th, a cashier's check for the full outstanding balance, plus accrued interest. Every dollar I had spent giving someone the benefit of the doubt returned. I held it for a moment before I put it in my bag. It did not feel like triumph. It felt like a balanced ledger, which is what it was. Derek's messages continued for about 3 weeks. I read them all. Some were genuine apologies, the kind that come from a man who has looked at himself clearly and doesn't like what he saw. Some were attempts to restart, suggestions that we meet and talk and find a path through. I did not respond to any of them, not to punish him, but because there was nothing to say that would have changed what had already been true for a long time. Some accounts don't close, they just stop. The ring went back through Ramos's firm with a receipt. His grandmother's ring back to his family where it belonged. I sent it with a note that said only, I hope you keep being the person who fixed the table. I meant that, whatever he became. In the doorway moment, it was not all he was. I just needed all of him or none. And in the one moment that counted, he gave me none. In the weeks after, Mia asked about Christmas twice, why we hadn't gone in where we'd gone instead. I answered simply, some grown-ups forget how to be kind, and we don't wait on cold steps for them to remember. She received this, considered it, and moved on. Children are good at moving on when the adults around them are stable. Then, one Tuesday evening in late January, Tuesday like the night Derek fixed the table, like the night he proposed, Mia was drawing at the kitchen table while I made dinner, and she said without looking up in the flat, certain voice of someone making a statement, I didn't do anything wrong. Not a question, a conclusion reached on her own timetable in the way she does everything that matters. I set down the spoon. I turned around. I said, no, you didn't. You never did. She said, no. She went back to her drawing. It was our apartment, 2 figures in the doorway, the cat, every window lit up. Nobody waiting outside. That is the whole story. 1 cold porch, 1 quiet envelope, and a little girl in a red dress who made sugar cookies for people who had already decided she didn't count and who walked back down that driveway with her tin and her fancy dress and her dignity entirely intact, because the weight that was placed on her porch step was never hers to carry. It belonged to Sandra. It belonged to Derek. It was the weight of people who needed someone to be less than in order to feel like more, and it was not going to be my daughter. She is not that. She is the kid who narrates herself in the third person and draws houses with every window lit up and checks her sticker placement before she rings someone's doorbell. She deserved every window lit up. She got them. They're on her wall. Some doors only have power over you while you're still knocking. The day you stop knocking, you find out who actually owns the wall.